Hi, Kevin. That's right. The president's rhetoric is continuing to intensify on this war. His latest threat, an ultimatum on Iran. He says either reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face those powerful strikes on power plants.
When it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, Iran, I'm absolutely convinced that we will get this done together. Actually, it is already being planned.
So let's discuss the current situation in the Strait of Hormuz. And really, I think there's two sides of the story that need to be covered. On one hand, we have the picture with NATO, where up to 22 separate countries have now signed on to President Trump's demand to finally do something, come out and help, use their own assets to ensure the security of the world's oil supply. That quite hilariously includes Canada, who since the last time we discussed this has since joined the rest of the Western nations. You notice how they're always late to the party, they're last because they want to do the No Kings protest. We hate Trump. We're selling out to the other side. And then when they watch other European countries basically not go along with the protest, they in the end always cave. We've talked about this. It's the same story every single time with Mark Carney. But now even countries like Canada are joining in. And on one hand, you certainly still do have reason to be skeptical that they're actually going to do anything, because at this point, it is just pure talk. I mean, for how many weeks now have they been suggesting, oh yeah, the Strait of Hormuz is a serious security concern. We might have to potentially maybe consider doing something about it. But the good news here is that the NATO General Secretary, who essentially has been the mediator between Trump and the useless European leaders, is now basically ensuring Americans that he, first of all, is on Trump's side as it pertains to the Strait of Hormuz, and he actually has been a key ally of Trump. He's really been the one forcing these other European countries and putting on the pressure to actually contribute to NATO, but he is effectively saying here that he's going to go and make sure it happens, right? Make sure that these NATO countries follow through on their word. That was what was announced today, just this Sunday. So that is, I guess, a positive development in this story. Now, on the other hand, we have President Trump's recent ultimatum to Iran, effectively that if they do not stop harassing the Strait of Hormuz within the next 48 hours, he's going to take a major escalation in this war and begin targeting power plants and energy infrastructure within the nation of Iran itself. Now, a lot of people speculated, oh, this is a really bad thing. This is scary. This is going to take the war to a very bad place. However, despite whatever's being said publicly, according to the recent drop in oil prices that we just saw a couple of minutes ago, we could see maybe a suggestion, if we're going to believe the theory of follow the money, that this threat has effectively worked, and Iran, regardless of what they're saying about it in public or in the media, basically did capitulate to Trump's threat. I don't know. We're sort of theorizing on that, but we'll discuss that as well here today. And again, what the sort of central picture here is on the Strait of Hormuz, which we'll repeat is obviously important for the entire world, and that includes America. Right now, America does not itself get a lot of energy through the Persian Gulf to begin with. Drill, baby, drill has been largely effective. America really does get most of its oil from itself, after all. But the issue, of course, is supply and demand. And obviously, going into the midterms, we want gas prices to go back to what they were. And the fact that these other countries around the world are so reliant on Middle Eastern energy, unfortunately, has sort of a backlash effect on us as it pertains to economic factors there. But the news here is seeming to suggest, well, maybe we're solving that problem. I don't know, but we'll talk about it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, take a listen here to the words of the NATO General Secretary today, explaining how he is, again, going to make sure, essentially, that the European countries follow through, and he's confident the reasons why. There, take a listen.
You know, on Friday, he had a follow-up to what you heard him saying there in the Oval Office. On Truth Social, he says this: without the USA, NATO is a paper tiger. He says they didn't want to join the fight, but now that it's militarily won with very little danger for them, they're complaining about high oil prices. He called them cowards. So how does that square with what you're saying now about their willingness to show up?
Yes, well, again, the good news is that these 22 countries are following the President's lead on making sure that we free up the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, the military campaign is still ongoing, so that's why we are working now, these countries together, and also with the US to make sure that we assess what, when, and how we can do this. But let me also say this. The United States has been planning for this for weeks. For obvious reasons, because of security, it was impossible to share that knowledge with allies, because that would then have prevented the effect of the first attack, because there was a risk always of leaking. So I totally understand why the US was not able to share this with allies.
And hold on, pause right there, because this is a very important point, and I'm glad a European, in this case the NATO Secretary, is making that point, because you've heard Mark Carney of Canada, Emmanuel Macron of France, and a lot of these woke leftist leaders of NATO countries essentially berate the United States, claiming, oh, we weren't privy to these plans. They didn't tell us beforehand what they were going to do, and so why should we support America? And the argument there always has been, yeah, maybe the reason why America didn't disclose with half of the civilized world that, hey, we're about to attack Iran on this very date is for the very obvious security reasons there. And given, the way especially people like Carney have treated Trump and, their so-called ally in America throughout the past several years now, you probably see the very vindicated reasons as to why that's the case, okay? So again, just very glad here that even the NATO secretary is admitting, yeah, it would have been strategically really stupid for America to go and tell Europe beforehand what they were going to do. Just making that point. Anyways, let's keep listening.
But at the same time, it means that European allies and partners all over the world have used the last couple of weeks to make sure that we come together, that they started planning to see what we can do collectively as allies, as partners of the United States, at the moment that's possible, for the Strait of Hormuz to open up, and therefore answering the President's call on this. And that's what I told them. I said, hey, they are following your lead, and I think that's very important, and I'm sure that we've done this before. I mean, NATO has always come together. The President was successful in The Hague with making sure that all the allies committed to the 5%. On Ukraine, it is the US providing critical intelligence support for Ukraine and weapons support for Ukraine to stay in the fight, working together with the Europeans. And also here, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, Iran, I'm absolutely convinced that we will get this done together. Actually, it is already being planned.
Okay. Well, we know you have a unique relationship and a good communication that continues, so we will keep an eye on this as things proceed over there in the Strait. Secretary General, thank you.
So pretty big words there coming from the NATO secretary, who is effectively putting his credibility on the line to say, not only is he confident, in the end, the NATO countries are going to do something, even if it's taking forever, which it is, but fine. But as a matter of fact, it is already being planned. But oh, wait a minute, I thought we were watching the total collapse of the NATO alliance. That's what they kept telling me, right? The Europeans are rebelling against Trump. This is the end. America's isolated across the world. I said the whole time, that's 100% not true. It is true that the Europeans are fence-sitting about this. It is true that they're proving they're not all that reliable allies. But what did I tell you? It's not just about Trump or diplomatic pressure. It's about the fact at the end of the day, these countries and their economies rely heavily, even more heavily than the United States does, on oil prices and oil shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, if push comes to shove, they are going to be forced to come and act and do something, not to help America necessarily. After all, Trump has not demanded that NATO go in and offensively bomb Iran, but to simply come in and secure the flow of, guess what, not America's, their own oil supplies. And all it took was a little bit of the usual pressure, the usual Trump kind of chest beating against NATO to make that happen.
Opening the Strait of Hormuz is a simple military maneuver.
Very simple.
Yeah, but what did you mean by that?
It's a simple military maneuver. It's relatively safe, but you need a lot of help in the sense of you need ships, you need volume. And NATO could help us, but they so far haven't had the courage to do so. And others could help us, but, we don't use it. At a certain point, it'll open itself at a certain point. But we've defeated the enemy, and they are an enemy. They're a sick group of people. The leadership is gone. The Navy is gone. The Air Force is gone. The anti-aircraft equipment that they have, the radar they have, is all gone. Everything's gone. The strait itself, the actual strait, how are you? The strait itself is, we're doing a good job. But it would be nice if the countries, including China, if the countries that use it, China uses it 90% of their energy. Japan is 95% of the energy. It would be nice if those countries would get involved.
Now, hopefully you did also notice the casual hint that Trump also dropped there. Keep in mind, this is a video from Friday where he says, NATO or not, Japan and NATO-aligned countries or not, the strait at some point is going to open itself anyway. What was he referring to there? Well, just hours later, Trump basically dropped this brand new ultimatum on the Iranian regime, which is that if they do not stand down and agree to stop harassing or making any public threats against the Strait of Hormuz, America would begin to target power plants and energy infrastructure in Iran itself. Because after all, basically the argument there is if you're going to mess with the energy of the rest of the world, keep in mind, Iran, this is mutually assured destruction. We can also mess with your energy. And that was a pretty big statement that was dropped. So take a listen.
President's deadline for that ultimatum to Iran about the Strait of Hormuz. To get into that Truth Social post, the president wrote, if Iran doesn't fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. That was last night. Today, Iran's Speaker of Parliament responded immediately after that happens. The critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and oil facilities through the region will be considered legitimate targets and destroyed in an irreversible manner. An Iranian military spokesman said private sector targets are fair game as well as oil and energy infrastructure.
All power plants, as well as the energy and information and communications technology infrastructure of the Zionist regime, will be extensively targeted. All similar companies in the region that have American shareholders will be completely destroyed.
Meantime, President Trump spoke with Israel's Channel 13. He said that we will find out soon what will happen in the likely event that Iran does not meet his deadline or answer his ultimatum. He says Iran has been acting bad for 47 years. They're about to get their comeuppance.
Yeah, so that's what you heard publicly. Trump says if you don't back off within the next 48 hours, then we're going to start targeting your power plants and energy infrastructure. Iran responds publicly with defiance, saying, okay, if you do that, then we're going to hit more energy infrastructure across the Middle East and spark an even bigger energy crisis than we already saw. And it's the typical, chest beating, all that sort of back and forth. And as a result, by the way, you saw a panic in markets over the weekend, right? Stock markets, Japan, for example, their stock market went down about 4%. American ones closed at a little bit less than 1%, but down, right? A decrease from what they were at before. But a pretty interesting development you can see right here within the last couple of hours. All of a sudden, oil prices expectedly were rising as a result of the panic that, hey, maybe the energy crisis might get worse in the Middle East. And then all of a sudden, at the time we're recording this, we saw a pretty dramatic drop all the way back down to below $100 a barrel, currently sitting at about $97 here in U.S. markets, right? So it climbed slightly above 100, 101 or so, and then all of a sudden, boom, something happens here. So, I don't know if this means anything, but we have sort of tried to stick with the logic here thus far throughout the conflict, and I think it is overall pretty reliable after all. Follow the money, right? See what the markets are doing. By the way, see especially what oil prices are doing, because usually the people with money on the line here, they're getting the information first, most likely. And if not, we just know that they have investments tied into all this stuff that, obviously a lot's on the line for them. So, they got to sort of make these moves effectively and with good judgment. And so what I'm using all of that to say is this could potentially be a sign behind the scenes that a deal has been reached, at least as it pertains to the Strait of Hormuz. Again, we don't know. All we can say is, first of all, the NATO coalition to come and help out sounds like within the next couple of weeks, however long these slow Europeans take, does sound like is going to happen, right? So you're going to get the naval security in the Strait that is obviously very important. Trump is ramping up the pressure, basically showing that, hey, we're willing to take this war a step further if you continue to mess with a global oil supply. And then this is what happens in the market. So interpret that, right, as you will. Now, it's also worth noting this was the public response from the Iranian foreign minister, and it is sort of vague and confusing, but at the same time could suggest, I don't know, did they agree behind the scenes? We don't know. But here's what Aragachi, whatever his name is here, stated. This is the Iranian spokesperson that you've seen often talk to NBC and Western outlets and all that. But he is stating, and I quote, "The Strait of Hormuz is not closed. Ships hesitate because insurers fear the war you initiated, not Iran. No insurer and no Iranian will be swayed by more threats. Try respect. Freedom of navigation cannot exist without freedom of trade. Respect both or expect neither." So you do notice that's not exactly a statement publicly where he's caving and apologizing, but there is a little bit of nuance in that, right? He's saying, oh, the Strait of Hormuz is not closed and we wish you would respect us, but, we're not doing anything is what Iran is claiming. Now, we've already well established how the Iranian regime are complete liars, right? They claim they have not closed the Strait of Hormuz, and then hours later, they go send suicide boats to blow up random oil tankers belonging to countries like Thailand or Iraq. We also covered yesterday, by the way, how they claimed they did not have intermediate range ballistic missiles, and their capacity only went up to about 1,500 miles. And then what happens next? They launch missiles at Diego Garcia, which they claim they didn't have. So obviously the Iranian regime's not all that trustworthy. I'm not really taking this statement to mean anything at this point. But you combine sort of a clarification statement from Iran claiming they're not closing the strait and also the oil markets. We'll see what happens, right? I'm not saying anything definitive. It could be the case that tomorrow night you see those very threatened strikes on the power plants go through and happen. It could be possible, 100%. But this is just some news that I'm showing you to suggest maybe some agreement here, at least temporarily, has been reached. And you have to imagine that the international pressure with even other countries now, the whole world basically, getting really pissed off about what Iran's doing in the Strait of Hormuz, maybe is playing a factor. I don't know. Feel free to let me know your thoughts on that, guys, in the comment section down below. But all right, until then, be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.